Hello students, in the last session we have discussed creating objects. In that we have seen how an object is declared and instantiated in Java, and we have also discussed accessing class members by using the objects. In today's session we will discuss constructors in Java. As we know, a class contains data fields and methods. Apart from data fields and methods, a class may also contain what is called as constructors. So constructors are usually used to assign values to the variables which are declared inside the class. So let's start with the constructors. So constructors are similar to the methods. Constructors which we declared inside the class are almost similar to the methods. Can be used to initialize values. As I've said, constructors are usually used to give values to the variables which we declare inside the class. Constructor have same name as class. This is important. Whenever we declare a constructor, the constructor should have the same name as the class name. All classes have constructors, whether you define one or not. Every class which we declare in Java has a constructor by default. Whether we define it explicitly or not, that doesn't matter, but by default every class in Java has a constructor, and that constructor is called as default constructor. So default constructor generally has no code inside it, but every class which is created, which is declared, have that default constructor. Constructor do not specify return type. Like a method specifies a return type, but constructors do not have a return type, because constructor do not return any value, and that is why constructor do not have a return type. Now as we call a method by using the object of a class or instance of a class, the constructor is generally called when the instance of a class is created. Now it is called when an instance of a class is created. A method is called after creating an instance, whereas a constructor is called at the time of creating an instance of an object of a class. Syntax of constructor is given here. For example, if you have a class as the name class name, then we have a constructor, or we should declare a constructor with the same name, that is class name, and it may take parameters, any number of parameters, and even a constructor has a body like a method, flower bracket open and flower bracket close. So any number of statements can be included inside the body of constructor. So this is how a constructor needs to be declared. Remember, the name of a constructor should match with the class name, and there is no return type for the constructor. No return type. Okay, let's look at one example. Okay, this is our example. We have public, P is small here, public class my class. So our class name is my class. Inside this class we have a variable called as num. It is of type integer, Then we have declared a constructor. You can see here my class, and if you look at the name of constructor, it is matching with the name of class, and that should match. This constructor is taking one argument, that is into n. And what we have done in the constructor, if you look at the body of a constructor, we have one statement, that is num is equals to n. That means we are giving value to the variable num. So constructors are generally used for this purpose. It is used to assign values to the instance variables of a class. So the variable of a class here, it is num, and to that we are assigning a value which we have received in the constructor. Okay, then we have a closing bracket of constructor as well as a class. Then we have one more class, that is class constructor demo, which contains the main method. So this is a main class, and from this main class, how we are calling the constructor here, you can see we are creating an object here. Object we have seen in the earlier session, object can be created, that is declaration, then instantiation, but object can also be created in a single step. We have seen object creation in 2 steps earlier, but this is the way we can create an object in single step. Both the steps are combined here, that is declaration and instantiation. So we have my class t1, so class name my class space t1 object of my class is equals to new, this is I said constructor, new constructor call, and to the constructor what you're passing is 10. So this part of a object creation, it is for constructor, and here we are calling my class constructor and by passing value 10. So from the here the constructor is called, and when the constructor is called, the value is sent, the value 10 is sent, and that will be stored in n, and the same value will be assigned to num. Okay, same way we have created one more object of the class my class t2 is equals to new my class, but the value here which we are passing, it is 20. So again the constructor is called, and the value which is stored in num, it is 20. Now one thing to remember here, t1 and t2 both are different objects, and both of this object has its own variable num and constructor. They are not sharing variable num here, because instance variables are associated with the object. Every object has its own set of instance variables, and that is the reason when I store 10, this 10 is stored in the variable num of t1 object, whereas 20 is stored in the variable num of t2 object. Means t1 and t2 both of them are having separate variable num, and when you print here, when you say system.out.println t1.num, then plus we are concatenating here some space in between, then again we have concatenated with t2.num. So here t1.num will print value 10, whereas t2.num will print a value 20, because t1.num and t2.num are two different variables, are not the same variables. Okay, let me execute this, and let me show you the output of this particular program. Okay, let me copy this first. Okay, let us open Notepad++, type our program. So I have already copied the program, I'll paste it. So this is a program, as I've said, P has to be small here. Then I'll save it. While saving, one thing to remember, the file name and the class name should be same. Now again look at the program. We have class my class, and we also have a class cons demo. Now what should be that file name? My class or cons demo? The answer is cons demo, because cons demo contains main method. So always save with a class name which contains the main method. So here it is, cons, that is constructor demo dot java. Okay, I have saved it in F drive. So program is saved. Let us go to the terminal. I'll open cmd from run. Here first we need to move to the folder where we have saved our program. As you know, we have saved it in F drive, so I'll move to F, that is F folder. Here we will compile our program by using javac space file name. File name is cons demo dot java. Okay, it is compiling. Okay, you can see it has displayed one error. The error is class my class is public, should be declared in a file named myclass.java. Okay, this is because there can be only one public class, so I'll just remove public for my class, and we have a public class, that is const demo. Okay, let us compile again. Okay, the program is compiled. Let us see the output of this program. So let us execute cons demo. Okay, now you can see the output. t1.num prints 10, whereas t2.num prints 20. As I've said, whenever you create objects, a separate memory is allocated to every object. So t1 will have a separate memory block. Okay, let me show you. Okay, whenever we create objects like t1 and t2, a separate memory block is created for t1 and t2, and both of those t1 and t2 has its own set of variables. So if you look at my class, it contains one variable num, and we have created object t1 of my class. So t1 will have its own set of variable num. Even when we create t2, even t2 will have its own set of variable num. And when we call a constructor my class by passing 10 here, which is assigned to num, so this 10 is stored in t1's num variable. And when we create t2 and we call a constructor by passing value 20, this 20 value will be stored in t2's num variable. So both of those t1 and t2 are having separate set of variables. And when I say t1 dot num, so t1, this is a t1, and dot num means this variable, and that prints 10 because it contains 10. And when I say t2 dot num, that is this variable which contains 20, and it will print 20. Okay, so this is how we can declare a constructor in Java. And as I've said, every class which we create has a default constructor, even when we do not declare one explicitly. Okay, that's it for today's class. We will stop here. Thank you.